Hello. Oh, thank you. Hi. Our next speaker is Shruti Kapoor. Shruti is a staff engineer at Slack, a fellow UBC alumni. Go Thunderbirds! And a former contestant for Miss World Canada. She is a dev joke queen, it's true. Her Twitter is funny. And she has a YouTube channel where she teaches coding, but it's also got a 2-hour Code With Me lo-fi. Pretty good. And she recently gave a talk on React 19 at Render ATL. And it was so good that it was featured on the Twitter Explore feed page. And for those of you in the Twitter text space, that means you made it. So if you want to see Shruti's pageant photo, give it up for Shruti.
Yes, that is not a lie. I was in a pageant once. I've done some weird shit. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk and staying. I know it's been a long day. I'm going to talk about React 19 for the next 25 minutes. Quick warning, trigger warning, there are some animations in the presentation. I will try to give warnings as I remember them. Starting with this first animation. So if you've been sleeping, React 19 is now in RC, which means it's not ready for use yet. React 19 RC stands for Release Candidate, which basically means it's ready for library authors to try out. But as an app developer, you can wait and upgrade to 18.3 to get ready for React 19. So why am I doing this talk if it's not ready? Because it's the hot shit. Well, I feel like every time a new version of React is announced, somebody like me who's an app developer, works at a company like Slack, is just like, oh my God, wait, do I have to worry about my app getting deprecated and some of my APIs not being there anymore? And through this talk, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about React 19, the changes that are upcoming, and how you can get your app ready for React 19. So we're going to talk about everything that you need to know about React 19. Let me try to reshare this, because it looks like font is cut off. How's that? Better? Sweet. Oh, thank you. So we're going to talk about what's new, what's changing, and we'll do a quick demo of some of the most important features of React 19. But before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Shruti Kapoor, and this is my pageant photo. I'm a front-end engineer at Slack, and you can find me on Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever, at Shruti Kapoor08. And if you've seen any of my talks, you know what's coming up. Dev jokes! So the way this works is I'll ask you a question, and you can just say the answer out loud. And there are no wrong answers. The nerdier, the better. So first question. What is a React developer's favorite workout? Runtime. Oh, that's really good. Love it. Somebody else said something. Lifting state! Hey! Winner! You were not at Render, were you? How did HTML get drunk? Say what? Oh, forgot to. Oh, that's really good. Forgot to close the tab. That's really good. It had too many beers. Do you know a dev joke? Then send it as a pull request. OK, I know some of you are like, OK, I didn't come here for jokes. Tell me the React 19 shit. So let's talk about what's new in React 19. So React 19 features or React 19 updates can be broadly divided into new features, new hooks, and new APIs. Let's first talk about the React 19 features. I think React 19 has a big focus on improving how forms are supported, and one of the hook or features that enables that is React Actions. React Actions makes it easier to handle forms. And here's an example. You may have heard of React Actions in the server context. It takes its inspiration from Remix, actually. So here's an example of how we handle input fields today. So there's an input field on the screen right now, and we usually have like a set state that we assign whenever there's an on change, and that's how we store whatever was updated in the input. And then if you want to submit this is a div right now, but this could be a form as well with multiple fields. If you want to submit this form, we'll have a handle submit function, and then once we handle submit, we'll take everything that was submitted in the state and handle it. And then if we want to show a loader, we also do that typically in the handle submit function, which is where we call our API. And the way we do that is we'll first set our is pending to false or to true so that we can show a loader, call an API. Once you've done calling the API, we'll set the is pending to false, and that means our loader can go away. And this is how we do kind of loading states right now and handle forms right now. Now, with React 19, we can actually have an async function within start transition itself. Start transition was introduced in React 18. So here in handle submit, I'm using a start transition. There's an async function within it, and that's where I'm going to handle. Now, because start transition is used to manage urgent updates, it also gives us back an is pending variable. And that is the variable that gets automatically updated whenever an API is being called and set to true. And then once the API is called and the function is done, it is set to false. So this is the variable that we can use to show a loader. And that is an action. So action is basically an asynchronous function that we can use. That's all. That's action, functions that we can use to do async transitions. They're also supported on the server. And I talked about how React Actions helps to give better support for forms. And this is how we do it. You might have seen this kind of syntax in PHP. It looks pretty familiar. But now, instead of having to submit a form by using a handle submit on a button, we can just tie a form with an action using action function. This action function comes from a hook called useFormStatus, and the signature looks like this. We'll look at this in a detail in 1 second, and we'll also look at some code to figure out what it is. But basically, what you need to look at here is there is a pending variable, and there is a data variable, and an action variable that is super helpful for getting the data that was submitted to the form, taking it out, and using it in our state, and using the action, which is used to submit the data. So that was React Actions. In short, React Actions are super helpful for submitting forms and provides a better support for submitting forms in React 19. The next feature is React Compiler, which I am actually super excited about because with React Compiler, you do not need to use useMemo and useCallback anymore. And I know, so exciting. And useMemo and useCallback actually is a huge pain because if you know about optimizing React applications, you know that useMemo and useCallback are super important. And oftentimes, you have to find code something like this and add it around useCallback. It's usually a manual process. You have to first figure out which function is slow, figure out where the performance is slow, and then add wrappers around it, optimize your functions, and so on. But with React Compiler, there's auto-memoization, which means that React Compiler figures out the places in your code which are slow and optimizes the code so you don't have to use useMemo and useCallback anymore. One interesting thing that if your code is really well memoized with useMemo and useCallback and you're doing a great job, you may not see any performance optimizations, but I've seen that oftentimes whenever I have useMemo and useCallback, I often forget to put it at places where I need to. And so React Compiler can do a pretty good job at that. So the way it optimizes it, it reduces re-renders. And let's take a look at exactly how it does that. There are two things that it optimizes. The first is it skips re-rendering of children when parent updates. And you might have seen this, that in React, anytime a parent's props changes, all of its children update. And here is an example. So here's a component. There's a friends at the top. Friends could be an array. And you'll notice here that there is a map, which maps over friends and renders a component. And then there's a message button, which has nothing to do with friends. However, anytime friends updates, all of these components update. Right now, we have 2 components, but you can imagine this could have multiple components. And this can lead to a lot of re-renders. So React compiler optimizes this by understanding that message button doesn't depend on friends. So it doesn't need to re-render that. And also, the value that comes back from friends list card can be reused if needed if friend hasn't changed. So the second thing it does is it skips expensive calculations. And exactly how it does is it understands the knowledge of the JavaScript rules and rules of React to figure out where we can skip expensive calculations. One caveat, though, is only memoizes React components and hooks and not every function, which basically looks like this. For example, if you have a really expensive function at the top, it won't memorize that specific function because it's not within a hook and it's not within a React component. However, if you're calling this function within a component, the value of that function is still memoized. So you still get some benefit. The React compiler looks like this. This is the React compiler playground. So if you want to figure out which code has been optimized, you can take a look at React compiler playground. And why this is helpful is because I mentioned that it follows the rules of React. And let's say that some of your code is breaking rules of React, you don't know, you're not aware of it. You can look at React compiler playground to figure out which components are breaking rules of React. And the way to figure that out is on the left side is the component, and on the right side, you'll see a $sign. Hopefully, that's legible in the back. And you'll see a little $sign. So the $sign basically represents that that code has been optimized by a React compiler. So in short, no more use memo and use callback. But what if you're a big fan of use memo and use callback? Don't use it. React compiler is actually available as an ESLint plugin. So you can just npm install ESLint plugin, and it looks like this. One really cool thing about React compiler is that there's a working group with it. I was part of React 18's working group, and I had an amazing experience learning about React 18. So if you're interested in React compiler, I highly recommend it. Great place to ask questions and have discussions. So that was React compiler. Now let's take a look at some of the new hooks that React 19 introduces. The first hook is useFormStatus. We kind of briefly looked at it, but let's understand what it does. It actually gives you the info of the last form submission. So here's the function signature. It gives you back pending, data, method, and action. And pending is set to true or false depending on if the form is being submitted. Data is a form data object. Now here's a little catch. It is a form data object. It's not a JavaScript plain object. So if you're used to doing like data.name being the property, you can't do that anymore because it's a form data object. So you have to do data.get and then the property name. This can kind of lead to some errors, so be careful of that. Method is get or post, whichever you want to use. And action is the function action that we can use by creating another action, which I'll show you in a minute. One catch, though, is you can only use it inside a form's child. So what does that mean? So for example, you have a form here, and I want to show a pending loader state or something. I cannot use it before the form. I have to use it inside the form. So here you'll see I created a submit component itself, and within the submit itself, you can use the pending state from useFormStatus. So you cannot use it above the form. It has to be a child component. The next hook that we're going to take a look at is useActionState, which updates the state based on an action. And this is super handy as well because it gives you back the state that was modified after the form was submitted and the form action. And the function that it accepts is the function to be called when the form is submitted. This is kind of like your action. So here's an example. And this is the form action that comes back from this hook is the action that you will use to wire up your form with. And then we also have useOptimistic, which is really cool because it can be used to optimistically update the UI. And React now gives it directly to you. The function signature looks like this, pretty straightforward, optimistic state and add optimistic. React also introduces a new API. Now this looks like a hook, but it's actually an API. Use is actually an API that can be used to read resources. And when I say resources, I mean context and promise. Let's take a look at context. So use can be used to read context like this. You might be familiar with use context hook, which also does the same function. The main difference is that use context is a hook, and this is a API. So that basically means it doesn't follow the rules of hooks. So you can have it. You don't need to have it at the top of your component. You can have it anywhere in your component. One caveat, though, that it does not support. Oh, wait. Also, use can be used to read promises as well. So something like this. So you have a comments promise. You can use as well. One caveat, though, is that use is not supported for render promises. So this comments promise needs to come from a server framework. So kind of useless. So it can only be used in render. But one good thing is that because it's not a hook, it can be called conditionally as well. So in short, what's new in React 19? There's features, React compiler, React actions, hooks, use action state, use form states, use optimistic, API, and use. OK, so what's changed? Real quick, ref is a prop. I'm so happy about this, because if you've used ref ever, passing refs was a big pain in the ass. Anybody who's used refs? Yes, oh my God. So you don't need to use forward refs anymore. Basically, for those who have not used ref before, I'll explain in a quick second. If you had to pass refs ever to a component, to a child component, in your parent component, you need to wire it up with forward refs, and only then the ref would be passed down. So even though it looks like a prop, it did not function as a prop. But with React 19, it's now a prop, no problem, no undefined issues. So happy about that, going to clean up so much code now. No more use memo, use callback. No need to do manual memorization anymore with React compiler. There are some other updates, and I'll quickly talk about them. So error are also getting improved with React 19. Basically, there won't be any duplicate errors in the console. Instead of using context provider, we're going to use context, which is nice. Ref now also comes with a cleanup function. One thing that I'm super excited about is the metadata, and it kind of looks like this. So if you have your own site, I think this might be really helpful. So let's say that you have different components on your different pages or different components. Typically, in React 18 or below, what you would do is you would put the meta tags within your index.html, and that goes for the rest of your app. But with React 19, it now lets you put metadata within your component itself. So if you have different pages, you can have different metadata, which is really cool. React also now provides a better support for style sheets. Specifically like this, we can provide a precedence of default or high. And now React can understand which of these style sheets should be loaded prior or later, depending on the styles of the code itself, depending on which style is used first and later, which is really cool. So to upgrade React, what we need to do is just npm install, super easy, React beta or 19RC or whatever. And it looks like this. Now time for demo. Yeah! OK, so I've been talking about forms a lot. So in this demo, I'm going to focus on how React 19 changes the way we do forms. And oh, yes, you can see my screen. Cool. OK. Font is probably small in the back, so I'll zoom it in. OK, so this is a super simple form. I just want to show you the differences between React 18 forms and React 19 forms. So all this does is, let me refresh this page. All this does is if I write a name, it just says hello in React 18, which basically means I'm using React 18 form, and it says the name. And then if I click on update, which is submitting a form, it'll submit to the backend, like my fake backend. It'll show a loading state. If I click on this, it'll show a loading state. And then it'll just show me the name that I inputted. So if I change it to, I don't know, Tejas. Hi. It'll say hello in React 18 Tejas. Cool. So let's take a look at how this code works. And hopefully the code is big enough in the back. Yes? Cool. Awesome. So here's a demo of the code that we do right now. So this is how we do forms in React 18. We have a form. We have an input field. And then we have a button. So when we click on the button, we have a handle submit function, which does its job. And we disable this button if it's pending. That means we are submitting the form. And then if the pending state is also true, we show a loader. And if it's not true, then we just show the name. Super simple. I just want to show you how isPending works and how submitting a form works. OK, so how do we do isPending right now? We do isPending by using a state. And then we set isPending to true before we call our API. This is where we'll call our fake API. And then after we've called the API, we'll set it to false. This is how we do forms in React 18. And also, if we want to show the name, we usually put it in our set state as well and just show the name. Now, with React 19, I've been talking about how we do actions. So I have a React 19 code here, and what I'm going to do is uncomment this, comment this out. So you can see this side by side. Actually, let me uncomment this so you can see this side by side. OK, so now I've got a form here. In React 19, I need to change the handle submit. I need to get rid of this handle submit and change this to a form action. So I'm going to do that right here. So now I have a form. I hook it up to an action. This is the form action. Where does this form action come from? This comes from the useActionState hook. This is the new hook that's been introduced in React 19. Now, this hook accepts two things, an initial state, which I'm just passing on as like blank name, and an action, which is submit action. Let me show you what submit action does. So submit action is simply an asynchronous function, like I said, and it accepts two things, the previous state. This is really helpful if you want to modify the state, add to the state, and the form data. This is the data that came from the form. So this will have all of your input fields, checkbox, anything. So for me, I only have one parameter, which is the name. And so I'm going to get that from the form data object using the get property, and then pass in the property I'm looking for. So here's something that can cause an error. If you put something that's undefined, this won't give an error. It'll just give you undefined. So be careful of the name property here. Then I'll call my fake API and return the previous state. That's it. I'm not doing any pending states here. So all my action does is gets the name, and then append, just sends it back to the name. Just sends it back using the previous state as a state. So we looked at the actions, and here's what it returns back, just the state and the name of the thing that we passed back. And that is all we do with the useActionState. Now, useActionState gives us back the state, which was the data that was modified, which is where we were adding the name. And that is the state I'm going to use to render the name that was submitted to the fields, to the form. So in my name function, I'm just passing in the state and the name property. Now, I want to use the loader state as well. How do I do that? I talked about the useFormStatus hook, and I also talked about how this useFormStatus hook can only be used in a child component. So now within my form, I've created a child component loader, and I'm using the useFormStatus hook, taking out the pending, and using the pending to add a loader. And that's all I need to do. So in short, this is React 18. This is React 19. And just to make sure that this actually works, let's try this out. Now, it should say hello in React 19. And I get rid of this, comment this out, comment this out. OK, now I should have a React 19 form. And if I reload and I say, hello, Rachel, update. Hello, 19 Rachel. And that's how to do forms in React 19. Super simple. I know, looks easy, but it's not. So, quick recap. I think I lost my phone somewhere. Oh, well, no worries. I'll just stand here. OK, so quick recap. Here's the highlights of React 19. Forms are now getting a better support. We don't have to do handle submits anymore. We can now have an action just hooked up to it. It's now getting easier to manage pending states. We don't have to manually do it anymore. We can use the async actions. No more use memo in callbacks, thank goodness. And no more forward ref, so ref is now an easy prop. Here's a quick overview of all of the React 19 updates. I did not talk about React Server components. They're also becoming stable, but I'll pause here for a second in case you want to take a screenshot. Cool. OK. One last thing before I wrap up. I know that a lot of you want to speak at conferences, and it can feel like a very daunting thing. I promise you, it's not that hard as it may feel. You just need 3 seconds of courage just to walk from there to here, and just 3 seconds of courage to submit your idea as a CFP to a talk, to a conference. So I encourage you to submit your next conference talk. I know each and every one of you has something interesting to share, and you can become a speaker as well if you've been really, really wanting to do it for the longest time. As a helpful resource, I created a video called 6 Steps for Speaking at Conferences, where I talk about how to submit a CFP, how to think of an idea, and when you get up on the stage, how to kind of like not freak out and lose your shit, and that's here. And with that, I have, wait, don't play the con, okay. With that, wait. One final dev joke. How does a developer cheer? Happy hooray! Thank you, everyone.